Greetings, SEA families. This month we are focusing in particular in the lower school on the virtue of courtesy. As you know, as a school, we have 6 virtues that we focus on. Last month we were zoned in particular on courage, and this month we're talking a lot about courtesy. And it can be quite a contrast at times because when we talk about courage, it's the kind of thing that can feel very grandiose, like it's a big thing. We talk about what it looks like to be courageous. And when we talk about being courteous, it can seem more mundane. Courtesy itself is a bit of an old school word in that we don't use it a lot. We might say kindness or politeness, and these synonymous words get toward the same reality, which is that we want to look like the kind of community that's characterized by being courteous to one another. So what does that mean? Well, in part, that means showing good manners. In part, that might mean that there are opportunities to express kindness even beyond the day-to-day. There might be unique opportunities to show courtesy to one another. So this looks different as far as our discussions with students at different ages. In kindergarten, for instance, they're learning to, when they're lining up, to keep their hands to themselves, to make sure they're listening first and not just speaking whenever something comes to their mind. It is a significant habit that we form early on to want to make sure students are developing the thought process that puts others before themselves. 3rd grade, for instance, they might be looking at showing respect when they're listening to a classmate recite a poem. Or perhaps it's when they're walking into a special and they are going through the hallways and recognizing that other students need to be learning too, so it's important to be quiet. Or in 6th grade, as they were doing poetry recitations about the beginning part of the Odyssey, they learned to listen well to one another and to show courtesy in that way. Or when they're doing science labs, they can be good partners by listening and by partnering together as they go into the laboratory process. And so at each age, this is going to look a little bit different, but there are commonalities throughout that we seek to find connections toward, even in what we're reading. And so Ms. Denbow, for instance, has showed us what this looks like in the context of reading stories to students. And so one of the stories that she's reading to 3rd and 4th graders is called The 3 Questions. And this is a story based on a story by Leo Tolstoy. And in this story, there's a boy who is considering what the 3 most significant questions are. And he's talking to animals about these questions. These animals, of course, can talk. And the boy's name is Nikolai. And he goes and he wants to ask these 3 questions. He says, when is the best time to do things? Who is the most important? And what's the right thing to do? And he goes and he asks his friends these sort of questions, and he's thinking like, well, I'm not really that satisfied with the answer. What's the right thing to do? To go flying? No, that doesn't really seem like a good answer. Who's the most important person? No. Who heals? Well, I mean, certainly people who heal are important. He starts to wrestle with his friend's answers and thinks, I've got to keep looking for answers. So he goes and he finds a turtle named Leo. And this turtle named Leo is digging a hole, and it's hard. He's an old turtle, and Nikolai says, well, I want to know the answer to these 3 questions. He asks the questions. The turtle doesn't respond, but he ultimately says, hey, well, I can help. It's easier for me to dig than it is for you. And so he grabs a shovel, and he helps the turtle start digging. Well, eventually it starts pouring down rain, and in the process of pouring down rain, they go inside after having helped a bit, and then they hear a loud sound, and Nikolai comes running out, finds that there's a panda bear that's been hurt. And this hurt panda bear is able to bring in through the rain and storm, and to carry inside and ultimately be able to help with the panda's broken limb. And the panda then says, well, where's my child? And Nikolai, not realizing there's a baby panda out there, runs outside through the rain and storm and looks for this baby panda. Eventually finds a baby panda who's whimpering, brings the panda back inside, reunites the panda with its mom, and they end up being just fine. So ultimately, the pandas go on their way, and Leo and Nikolai are having a conversation, and Nikolai says, well, I still want to know my answers to these questions. How can I figure these out? And Leo looks at him and says, well, you already know the answers to them. He says, well, when you're looking at, like, what's the most important time? Well, when you found me and I was digging, that was the most important time. You helped me. When you found Panda, that was the most important time. Right? Well, who's the most important? Well, in the time when you helped me, I was the most important. When the time when you helped the pandas, they were the most important. And then ultimately, what's the right thing to do? It's to do good toward whoever is around you. The point of the story is, of course, not to think about being against long-term planning, but rather to get across the idea that we have opportunities to show kindness and courtesy toward those who are around us each and every day. I want to encourage us as a community to be asking ways to do this. For instance, as we engage with one another, to have a posture that says, help me understand before jumping to conclusions. To have a posture that says, how can I help? In what ways can I help or serve? And we have great opportunities to do that in big ways and in small ways. I want to encourage you to have these conversations with your children at home. And feel free to reach out to me or to your child's teachers to think about ways to continue the conversations that start in the classroom. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.